Hello, everyone. I just wrapped up my conversation with Victoria Byler, and I got to tell you, I'm loving these expert on expert conversations that I am having with my friends and my colleagues. So, in this episode, we talk a lot about masculinity, men, cis men, and how they navigate emotions. And that is one of Victoria's expert areas is she focuses a ton on working with men and helping men unlearn a lot of these cultural scripts that we inherit. And as a man, right, it felt really cool and affirming to talk with someone who does this work, right? Because this work is needed across the board. So I'm really excited for you to take a listen. And yeah, enjoy the episode. Victoria Byler, welcome to Sex Here and Now. I'm so excited to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me, Matt.
Yeah, no problem. I want you to officially introduce yourself to all of our listeners, but first I should say that I I told you this offline, but I'm really excited to have you because you're the first non-sex therapist expert guest that I'm having. And um, I mentioned this, but I love the content that you're putting out there. And we met, I would say, so like a year ago, a year and a
A
half
little over,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Victoria did what all clinicians should do that I do, which is like, you just reached out to me and said, I would love to connect. I would love to network. And we had just had such a great conversation. And your like niche area that we're going to be talking a little bit about today is just needed. And so, anyways, I do this thing that I've learned where I just praise my guests so much because I am in awe of what they do, but I will stop doing that and sort of just like if you want, like introduce yourself and tell everyone listening a little bit about you and all that good stuff.
So again, thank you for having me.
Mhm.
So Victoria Byler, I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I'm also the owner of Revive Counseling LLC on the west side of Cleveland, and I specialize in men's mental health. I do work with women, but I have a passion for men's mental health specifically, and I have a bunch of different modalities that I pull from. But my bread and butter is EMDR and expressive arts therapy.
Yeah, EMDR is EMDR is we could have a whole episode talking about that, but that's like such a really cool specialty to have. And one of the reasons I think I really gravitated towards you when we reached out is because I as a sex therapist, I don't do a ton of trauma work. And I think that's a big misconception that people have in the world is because you're a
Yeah.
certified sex therapist, then you have this experience and this wisdom in working with sexual trauma. And in our training, we do have some experience with it, but
Mhm.
uh, not a lot at all. And I'm a huge proponent of promoting areas of competency that I don't have. And one of those
Right.
is trauma work, right? I think that's so important. And so you having that modality and working from that lens, I think is really cool.
Thank you. And yeah, you're absolutely right because I don't do sex therapy, but I
Mhm.
do have components of things that come up in sessions because of like
Yeah.
work trauma, right, or sexual abuse or sexual traumas. So there's this overlap, but also trying to stay in your lane, right? So
Yeah.
it's always nice to collaborate with colleagues and to kind of touch base and explore how to best support our clients.
Yeah. For the non-clinicians who are listening to this, Victoria just used a really great phrase there of staying in your lane, which I find gets tricky for people because as therapists, we truly, I think most of us, some of us don't, but most of us have really good intention, right? And we do have this desire to help. And so when clients come to us, our empathy rises and we're like, oh my God, yes, I want to help you. I want to help you as much as I can. And sometimes the best thing you can do is refer somebody out. And so, as someone who has this niche specialty of sex therapy, I always like love working with clinicians who aren't sex therapists because I'm basically like, listen, you're gonna talk to your clients about sex. Sex is going to
Yeah.
come up,
Yes,
and
it's going to happen.
yeah, it's gonna happen. And so let's not shy away from it. Let's understand it because I want all clinicians to be able to talk about sex.
Yeah.
And then when they feel like, ooh, okay, now this is moving in a direction that I may not know, that's when you call me. That's when you call the
Right.
sex therapist. But before
Yeah.
that, it's like, yeah, that you should be able to have these conversations.
Absolutely. And I don't think I had ever a conversation in class about sex as a
Mm,
therapist, right? Like we never talked about it of like this is how you talk about it in a comfortable way with your clients. This is how it can still be beneficial. This is like the modalities to use in this, even if it's not directly like sex therapy, right? In that
yeah,
specialty, but just in general,
yeah.
it never was brought up in my education. So we're learning, as you know, and as many of our listeners may know too, of like we're all learning as we go in any field that you're in.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us therapists have a passion for like just consuming all the information and wanting to learn everything to help.
What 100%. They haven't updated the numbers on this in a while. They could have. I haven't looked for them, but most of us don't have a course in human sexuality. I did have a course in human sexuality back when I was in grad school. And I remember this was 2015, and I remember thinking, oh, this is cool, but I'm never going to use it. This stuff is private. We don't really talk about this stuff because that's the
Mm,
messaging that we get, right?
right.
Now fast forward 11 years later, I'm so glad I had that course. It actually moved me in the direction to becoming a sex therapist. But what's so great about this, Victoria, is a lot of clinicians will sit there and have zero comfort in talking about sex,
Right.
and especially with people of the opposite gender and whatnot. And so what I get really curious about with you is what made you move, right, as a cis female, right? What made you move in that direction towards wanting to work with men?
hmm Yeah, that's a great question. And it is a question I get a lot. And I think it's a couple different layers, right? Of
Mhm.
one, I saw that men are half our population, but yet we're really not talking about men's mental health, right?
Mhm.
And even though a lot of clinicians work with men, we're not really marketing to men, right?
Right.
Healing and wellness is often very much like even the fonts that we use, it's so
Oh
tranquil
yeah.
and calming and turquoise and purple, right? Like, and we
Yeah.
don't really extend an outreached hand to men,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because of the unfamiliarity of men in therapy and vice versa, right? Because it's just the stigmas, right? And like the messages that men absorb, and then how
Hmm.
that trickles down in a society of even how we like market and how we do therapy for men. So
Yeah.
and then also I think just my personality. I
Mm.
have been doing this for almost a decade, which I mean is just a drop in the ocean, the
Sure.
grand scheme of things, right? But
Yeah.
I noticed over that decade of like, oh, I really like working with men.
Mm.
Just
Hmm.
having a little bit more of a direct personality, having a different sense of humor, right? And humor is a huge part of therapy,
Oh
especially with
yeah.
men as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love that. You know, it is so interesting as someone who is a cis male who has been cultured and socialized that way. I often tell people that men we inherit certain scripts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are extremely still very toxic and very traditional. And it's gotten slightly better with each generation. It's getting a little bit more open, but I think what I'm still seeing with Gen Z, and I don't work with Gen Alpha, but just hearing it throughout, it's like I find myself still having like just as much hope as I do like despair in some capacity of like, oh God, okay, like we still need to do this work and we still need to reach out our hands to men, specifically straight men, I find, right? And let them know that there are these spaces that they can go to navigate and unlearn
Yeah.
all of that toxicity. And
Hmm.
so I guess like it sounds like that's part of this mission for you in some ways.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note that like dismantling some of those inherent beliefs that are installed throughout our life, right? Whether it's implicit or explicit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't me as a therapist arguing with you, right? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not here to be like, this is the facts, this is the research, feminism, right? Like, I'm not gonna do that. But
Mm-hmm.
uh what I am gonna do is explore like, oh, when did you get that message? How has that impacted you?
Yeah.
How does that serve you to continue to hold on to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just being curious about that. That's really what a lot of good therapy is being curious about our emotions, about the sensations in our body, about the beliefs, about our lived experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of where we came from and where we're going with that.
You know, it's funny, like I I was just telling another clinician friend of mine, I'm like, therapy is so hard to do. Like to be a therapist, it is so hard. But then at the same time, when you talk about it, it sounds so easy. Like you're saying, and you're like, I'm just getting curious and I'm just like exploring and I'm asking. And people can think like, oh, that's all I got to do. And it's like, in some
Mhm.
capacity, yeah, when you go to grad school, you learn these basic skills, you learn how to ask open-ended questions and how to reflect and how to do this stuff. But man, it is so hard to sit with people and
Mhm.
to actually be able to build that rapport. And I get curious for you, like as a woman, right, sitting with some of these men who may have these toxic notions.
Mhm.
How do you show up in that space? Like, does it feel energizing for you? Do you ever get like nervous? I guess like talk to me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to make a note of what you just said about how it's so simple, but yet not, right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny. My own therapist this week called me out and she was like, I know you know these things. I know you do them with your clients, but are you talking the talk or are you walking the walk? Right. And it's so
Mm.
easy to be like, oh, I know how to do this, but like, do I do it myself? Right. Because it's not just the logic and the knowledge, right? Same with clients, right? I
Yeah.
have all this knowledge, my clinicians taught me all these skills, but it's really about embodiment, right? And just
Mm.
confirming experiences,
Yeah.
more than just the knowledge, right?
Totally.
And then to answer the follow-up question to that of how do I feel? Oh my gosh, yes, I get nervous all the time. All the time. And I just try to stay grounded in that
Yeah.
curiosity of like I
Hmm.
don't have to fix, right? Which can be
Yeah.
extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Um, because the person across from you wants you to fix,
Oh,
right?
100%. Fix me, I'm
Mhm.
broken.
Yes, yes, it's uncomfortable. And oftentimes with men too, I'm at the end of my rope, right? I'm here because nothing else worked. You're
Mm.
my last hope. You're my last
Mm.
answer. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it comes back to that, do I feel seen? Do I feel heard? And I just
Yeah.
try to ground myself in that curiosity again.
It's probably very similar. So when I get nervous too, right? There are clients that come in and like our energy is starting to flow. And then I reflect on the session. I'm like, okay, like I'm a little nervous for session two. I want to see how this goes, right? I want to see how we continue to explore this stuff. So I think a lot of clinicians can relate to that. And
Mhm.
something that I tell my couples and poly folk who come to see me that in some ways I would have this mindset similarly, with men is, I tell them, you are like, you're showing up here shows me that you give a shit about your
Mhm.
relationship because a lot
Mhm.
of people would not show
Yeah.
up to
Mhm.
this. A lot of people would not come to
Mhm.
relationship therapy. So the fact that you're here is huge. And in some capacity, a specific kind of men who are coming to see you, right? The fact that they're even in your office is a win to begin with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a huge step, right? Because
Yeah.
we are fighting. the stigmas
Mm-hmm.
of what society says around mental health in men, and then going
Mm-hmm.
back to those inherent messages, right? Of like, I have to handle it by myself. I'm not allowed to cry,
Mm.
right? Like, performance and how I show up is where my worth is, right?
Yeah.
And all these messages really reinforce this, like, I have to be stoic, I have to be strong, I have to be a
Mm.
protector,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I like to be curious and challenge of like, can we not get rid of that, right? But like, can we be a protector, right? And carry ourselves in a way that we want to be perceived?
Mm.
And is there vulnerability, empathy, softness that can be ingrained in that, and they can strengthen each other and rather than canceling each other?
Yeah, like it's so interesting. We're sort of moving in and talking a little bit about the cultural scripts that we inherit, that men inherit, and you know, you sort of like named a few here, but the one that you were just sort of wrapping up with that I think is really interesting is this idea of like protector role,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like how do you show up in this world, right? And get these messages of like, I need to be this certain way, right? I need to be this protector. I need to show up. I am the man, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
also like, who's protecting you, right? Like,
Right.
who's
Uh-huh.
like being there for you to protect you in this? Why do you have to continue to be the one to always
Mm-hmm.
protect?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that becomes exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And we wonder why we're struggling with anxiety and depression and all these things, right? When our nervous
Yeah.
system's like, I've been in battle and
Hmm.
I need to rest.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, what do you notice, right? Like, you've been doing this for a while. I can sit and obviously I can talk from like the male perspective of like what I notice and how like the stuff that I do with my clients, my male clients specifically, all of it is around unlearning all of the toxicity around sex.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm like curious, like what you have noticed over the years, maybe like things that have changed over the past few years or these common themes that still are showing up with your
Mm-hmm.
clients.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same answer for both questions.
Yeah.
And that's like that protector role, right? Of
Hmm.
like, I'm seeing that like, um, my emotional restriction is my identity,
Mm.
right? And vulnerability feels like danger, but also I want to be vulnerable in order to protect because I know that what's working is no longer, or what has been working is no longer working, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm shielding everyone, as you put it, and my shield is like not doing its
Yeah.
job anymore, right? So I'm seeing this progress of men coming in and being like, I'm here to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better partner in general, right? Um, and also still struggling with those inherent scripts.
Totally. Right. It's so funny. Sometimes we have those gems that we tell clients that like
Yeah.
afterwards you're like, hell yeah, that was a gem. And one what keeps coming to my head is like, um, who's protecting you? How can you put down your shield? Right? Like stepping into those like moments because what you're talking about too, what I find as a clinician, and this is one of my um flaws is a strong word. It's one of the things that I constantly have to like go back to and remind myself over and over again is to not get too far ahead, right? And
Yeah.
that I think as clinicians, when we've been doing this for a while, and so one of the areas that I wrote down is just this simple concept of these men are coming in and they still may be believing that showing emotions equals weakness.
Right.
And I get so far ahead that I'm like, oh, there's absolutely no way they can probably be thinking that this person's a millennial or this person's 24.
Mhm.
How can they still be? And I will have these moments of like, You're getting too far ahead. This is the messaging that's still promoted. We
Yeah.
have to sit here and help them understand the importance of vulnerability in
Mm-hmm.
their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also this like maybe our clients even know logically, like, yeah, emotions are healthy. I'm allowed to
Mhm.
feel those, right? But there's a difference between like knowing logically and then giving ourselves permission to feel that inner like mind, body, soul,
Mm,
right?
mic drop. Totally.
I keep going back to that term of like disconfirming experience, right? Of like it's
Mm,
I can be told this, but until I sit down and the person across from me doesn't shame me for my emotions, doesn't
mm,
belittle me for crying, right?
mm.
And I can experience safety with this vulnerability. That's the discomforting experience that does the healing, right? It's
Yeah.
not the logic, it's the lived
Mhm.
experience of my nervous system is now exposed to something new and unfamiliar, and I'm teaching that that new and unfamiliar thing can be safe.
Yeah, and until then, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back into what I know to be safe, which
Yeah.
is stoicism and
Mhm.
strong and
Mhm.
broadness and whatever, right? Which
Yeah.
I do find with um you said something that is so true, which I find generationally is a huge difference between even like the boomer generation, the Gen X generation, and then in this millennial generation, is I'm finding more sort of what you're saying, which is these men are getting it, everybody, but we're talking about men specifically, are
Mhm.
getting it from a logical perspective,
Mhm.
right? They're getting like, okay, I know emotions are okay now. I've started the process of unlearning that, but I
Mhm.
have absolutely no idea how
Right.
to actually walk down that road.
Yeah, I am notorious for using analogies and metaphors in my office.
Mhm.
Like that's
Me
just how my
too.
work
So
is.
I
Yeah.
would love to steal whichever ones you're about to say.
Yeah. I love to use the one, let's see if I can word it well. But there's a difference between reading the recipe and cooking the recipe, right? I
Yes.
can read the recipe and be like, oh yeah, that looks great.
Yeah.
Matt, I'm gonna tell you what, I fucking suck at cooking. Like I am terrible at it. What
Yeah.
was it the other night? What was I making? Oh, I was making rice as a
Mm.
side, right? And we have a fucking rice cooker, right? Okay, I know 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of water ratio,
Right.
right? And then I mix it together and then I push down the little button.
Yeah.
That rice was dry as fuck,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like,
Burned
oh my gosh,
dry.
like
Yeah.
I know this logically. I've even observed it in my
Mm.
environment, right? My husband's the cook, so I'm like, oh, like I've seen him do it.
Yeah.
It worked. I don't know
Hmm.
why it didn't work for me, right? But there's that difference between that logic and then the doing.
Yeah. 100%. That's such a good one. I will often use a sludge metaphor that
Mm,
is your your normal neutral existence is walking down a road, right? And that's just life. You're constantly on this road, and then there's sludge ahead of you, and you have to walk through that sludge. You literally, there's no way around it because the
mm,
sludge is just there. And so now we
yeah.
got to step in it, and oh my gosh, our shoes are getting so gross, and God, this is so hard. Ugh, I
Mm,
hate that I'm in sludge. And it's because I'm an ACT practitioner, and this is a metaphor for acceptance, but it's this idea of at some moment, either when they're in therapy with us or um or either when they're coming to us or through therapy, I should say, is we have to look back and see how much sludge we've already walked through, right?
uh,
I know
mhm,
there's sludge ahead, but look at how much you've actually navigated before
mhm,
you either came to see me or now that we are here, right? And you just
mhm,
can't help what you don't know. And so the
yeah,
fact, again, that they're showing up and that we're doing that work is huge.
right. Yeah,
I'm
absolutely. That is better.
I'm curious about, I'm looking at some of the notes. As our listeners know, I talk with obviously the experts ahead of time to the to create some sort of game plan, right, with this conversation. But one of the things we've been doing a good job flowing through some cultural scripts, talking a little bit. I want to get to attraction a little bit, but this idea of shame versus responsibility,
Oh my
like,
gosh, yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that.
hmm Yeah, shame is a common company in the room.
What good phrasing.
And uh, you know, when we look at shame, right, I see that a lot of people confuse shame for responsibility, right? Because people want to be responsible, they want to be accountable, right?
Mm,
Again, that protector role, right?
yeah.
I don't want to drop the ball. And there's a difference between I made a mistake, I can repair, I can grow, I can learn to regulate through this versus I'm the problem, I'm weak, I messed up, so I'm messed up, right? Like the shame is very heavy,
Mm-hmm.
it's very personalized, it's very attacking, and
Mm,
we can have the responsibility without the shame.
mm. Yeah. The that notion too of shame existing, and I will sit with clients, especially men, and sort of tell them that we have to rewrite the entire script of what it means to actually be a man, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can see that this shame actually doesn't have to be a part of it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is tough to do in some ways, especially again, depending on environments. There's so many factors involved that help shape us. But if if I don't reach this certain level of perfection or expectation of who my father was or who my boss is or who my mentor is, then I am now being less than. I'm less of a man. I can't
Mm-hmm.
show up. I need to actually be excelling. I need to make this money. I need to
Yeah.
climb this ladder, right? I need to show it. And if not, then I am actually weak, or I
Yeah.
am less than, or fill in the blank.
Yeah, I'm a failure, right? Yeah.
Failure.
And it's ironic though, right? Because it's like shame is there to protect us in a way, right? Of
Yeah.
like better, be number one, right? Whether we're trying to pursue the ideal image or maybe the opposite. Maybe those people in our life were terrible and we are like, I want to go a whole 180 from what experienced in my
Mm-hmm.
childhood or whatever that is. But the irony there of like the shame is trying to protect us, but in actuality paralyzes us,
Yeah,
while
totally.
responsibility does the building.
Mm. Talk a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
That's such a I'm sure a novel concept for people who are listening to this.
Yeah. So I kind of think of it in this nervous system response, right? Of like we have green zone, red zone, blue zone. If you're listening and not familiar, a green zone is like we're regulated. We might have distress, but it's within capacity. Red is more of like the buildup of like irritation, anxiety, anger, fight or flight, fawn.
Hmm.
And then the blue is that collapse. And we can only have so much capacity for emotions before we get dysregulated. We can only have so much fight or flight before we collapse, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I constantly tell folks that it's not about getting rid of these zones, it's about knowing how to move through them and move out of them in a rhythm,
Mm.
right? Rather than like, I'm never going to be in the red or blue, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm stuck in the red or blue. So when we
Mm.
look at this like shame as a protector of like, I gotta be on my A game, I gotta show up for my kids, I gotta show up for work, I gotta make sure I send everything right, like very perfection, right? And oftentimes, because we're not expressing our emotions as men, it's all internalized. And
Hmm.
then if I do make a mistake or I drop the ball, or maybe it's even perceived, right? I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. Now I have the shame.
Hmm.
And now I'm being overwhelmed in that red zone of fight or flight because I'm going, is now in the blue zone of collapse. And now I'm paralyzed,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Versus rewriting the script, as you beautifully said earlier,
Hmm.
and maintaining responsibility of
Yeah.
like, okay, I did that thing. I can grow from that. I can do better. Rather than, man, that was terrible. I'm terrible.
Mm.
I can't do anything right.
The glue, right? The permanency, right? In ACT, we talk about a skill called diffusion, which is instead of saying I am a failure, you say I am having the thought that I'm a failure, right? Because the
Hmm.
thought is
Right.
that piece that we can actually change that's not permanent. And so sort of what you're saying, we have to teach them they're used to this groove right here. And we
Hmm.
have to teach them like, hey, there's this road over here that you can create this new groove. And
Hmm.
it's going to take time, right? You're not a robot. You're going to experience anxiety and stress and shame, and you're going to
Right.
fail again at some
Yeah.
point. So, how can we actually use this to move from green into red so that we don't actually get to the blue, right?
Hmm.
So that we can actually move through it, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
which is needed, right? Which is the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, I could sit and talk to you all day about this stuff. I'm definitely going to have you back on the pod later because there's some stuff that I still want to get to and talk to you about next time.
Hmm.
But um, I'm curious, Victoria, if there's any sort of pieces of wisdom. This is what I've been asking some of my guests, like pieces of wisdom or like things that, as a clinician that you want our listeners to know, especially our male listeners, if that are listening about therapy, about the work that you do, right? Like about the importance of moving through
Hmm.
shame and into vulnerability and all of that stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. I think the biggest thing I want my clients or, past, present, future individuals, whether it's with me or anyone else that's interested in therapy, what occurs outside of the walls of therapy, right? The shame, the whatever attachment style we have, right? Anxious or avoidant. Uh, it's going to show up in therapy within that relationship as well. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of like you mentioned earlier with the sledge, and I hope this lands, but because it's going to show up in therapy, you have the choice of repeating the pattern, or you have the choice of that disconfirming experience, right? Of like going through the sludge of like, hey, I'm noticing this pattern coming up in this dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like this is too much too fast, or we're not going fast enough, or I don't like this direction, or I don't like that thing you said, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, right? That the therapeutic office is not a magic place where none of our issues are going to come up, right?
Hmm.
Um, Therapists are not wizards.
Right.
So it's a great opportunity to use that awareness and that hopefully safe space, right, to work through that in real time. So that way you can do it outside of those four walls later.
110%. I couldn't have said it better myself, right? Like, let's use the container within therapy to actually navigate all of this that's showing up. So then you can go out and actually like deal with it in a way that feels a little bit more healthy and sustainable. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
well, Victoria, if you want anyone to like follow you or whatnot,
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can get if there's like an Instagram handle or anything like that. If people want more information on this like phenomenal work that you do or your website or anything like that.
Yeah. So my website is revivecounselingllc.online. And then my Instagram handle is revive underscore with underscore V.
Yes. Well, cool. Thanks for chatting with me today. This has been so fun, and I'm there's so much more that we can talk about men and emotions and all that. So I will definitely have you back for a future episode.
I love
So,
that.
well, thank you so much. Sex Here and Now is written and recorded by me, Matt Lockman. For For more resources, education, or support, you can find me on all social platforms at Cleveland Sex Therapy. Thanks for being here, and as always, stay curious.